Donovan Moodley, the man who pled guilty to killing Leigh Matthews, that 21-year-old Bond University student in Sandton, Johannesburg in 2004, might soon be walking the streets as a free man. This comes after a surprising hearing by the parole board on his third attempt for parole, and I will be diving into the details. And hang around until the end, because there's only one man in South Africa that is standing against law-abiding citizens like you and like me, and against this man being released on the street. Now, Leigh Matthews was a 21-year-old university student at Bond University in Sandton, Johannesburg, and in 2024, she was snatched from the parking lot of Bond University campus, and she was taken to a deserted area where she was held captive. Now, Donovan Moodley pled guilty to this, and what he did is that when he got her into that deserted area, he took her cell phone and he called her father, and he demanded 50,000 rand in exchange.
17 years ago, just days after her 21st birthday, Leigh Matthews was kidnapped from a Johannesburg university. Despite her family paying a ransom for her release, her fate was sealed and her bulleted body found.
But then he extorts money from the Matthews family in response, and as a reward he says he will release the daughter if the ransom money is paid. Rob, like any other father, goes and he pays the ransom money, and Moodley, of course, then reneges on his undertaking. He not only doesn't release her, but he murders her. And he murders her by shooting her 4 times in the back of her head, in her neck, and twice in her chest.
Moodley confessed and was convicted of murder, kidnapping and extortion, and sentenced to life imprisonment. However, after his incarceration, he appealed the conviction, retracting his confession and giving new versions. The family says he has shown no remorse.
The VOD process, I know what it's not. It's never going to be a reconciliation between Moodley and ourselves. He has messed our life up. He has messed a lot of people's lives up. And he has lied so many times. So it's hardly of any benefit to get in front of Mr. Moodley for the truth.
We seriously oppose any parole for Donovan Moodley. And we believe that there is no remorse, that he is an exceptionally dangerous criminal, and that he would pose a huge risk on law-abiding citizens in South Africa.
Now, we know that her father, Rob Matthews, that he would do the drop-off because he wanted his daughter returned safely, and Moodley collected the 50,000 rand in 2004 in South Africa. That was a lot of money. It is still a lot of money. And after that, Moodley returned to where he was holding Leigh captive, and he told her to strip naked, and he shot her 4 times point blank, killing her. Imagine how terrified she must have been in the last moments of her life. She had been forced to strip naked. She was killed at point blank range. Imagine the terror that was going through her. And the worst part about it is that he still held onto her body for 11 days. He's given different accounts of where that body was during those 11 days, but her body was only discovered 11 days later by people who were cutting grass in. Now, the judge that sentenced Moodley to his life sentence, Judge Hoop Labuschagne of the Gauteng High Court, stated that Moodley was not remorseful and that he must have had accomplices, because we know that Leigh's body showed signs that it had been in cold storage, that it had been kept cold for some time. 11 days later, the decomposition wasn't quite there where it should have been. Now, in Moodley's latest parole hearing, he has come clean. According to his lawyer, he has fessed up completely, and he said that he kept her in a manhole in a swampy area. I mean, imagine how horrifying that is, to stuff a body down a manhole and leave it there, and that he transported the body 11 days later because he saw that there were people who were cutting grass and he wanted her to be found. Now, we know that he has been in prison since 2004, and now it is 2025, 19 years later, and he wants to get out. But over the years, Donovan has not been exactly what I would call a model prisoner. We know that he has had an extensive prison record in the years. First of all, he has given various different versions of what happened. He never fessed up to perhaps his alleged accomplices, which many people believe he still has. And we know that he even approached the Constitutional Court for a retrial, claiming that he was the real victim here. Yeah, Donovan Moodley is the real victim. He had been forced by armed men in his own stories to perpetrate the kidnapping and murder Leigh, and forced to plead guilty. Otherwise, his family was going to be murdered. That was his first story, right? Now,
part of this reason is we just got to look back. As recent as 2017, Donovan Moodley went all the way up to the Constitutional Court, challenging his conviction and sentence. Despite him having admitted to the crime in a confession all those years ago, he was then challenging it and coming up with various different versions. Well, you can't exactly show remorse if you're not the type of person who at first admits to the crime, and then you need to reflect on what you have done and why it was wrong. These are among the submissions that they're going to make. Also, part of the reason is that they have submitted a victim's impact statement. This is the impact the crime has had on the relatives of the murdered victim. In this case, Rob and Sharon Matthews going into detail of how this has changed their lives. They are still going through therapy to this day, trying to deal with the loss of Leigh, despite it being almost 2 decades. It's a long process. They talk about the daughter, the older sister of Leigh, how she is still struggling. Even a mother herself now, just her children going to school, and the worry that she has, having flashbacks from the time that Leigh was kidnapped. So it's these kind of submissions that they've made to the parole board on the grounds that they do not want Donovan Moodley to be granted parole.
Okay. We know that he has had an extensive prison record. The parole board only saw the one from the last 18 months, not the whole 19-year prison history. And it has been previously declared in court that Moodley has not been a model citizen. I'm getting this straight from a newspaper. We know he was caught in possession of cell phones. You're not supposed to have cell phones when you're in prison. He was caught trying to buy a firearm. I wonder what he wanted to do with that in prison. And he accused Rob Matthews. This is the father of the daughter that he pleaded guilty to murdering, right? He accused Rob Matthews of having orchestrated an attempt hit on him in prison, claiming that he had managed to fight off his would-be assailants himself.
Moodley has threatened your family, threatened your legal representatives. How long ago was that, and what was the nature of the threats?
Okay, some of those threats were as recent as 2024. The one threat that was made in his court papers was that I had organised a hit on his life when he was in jail. And when the lawyers from Correctional Services responded to that, they found that in fact that was just a lie. Mm-hmm. That in fact it was an internal fight that he'd had with some individuals who had been sanctioned accordingly. But he chose to use that in papers to, I think, threaten me, create a position that I should be concerned. And that certainly does concern me if those controls aren't put in place, if they have not been able to say he's properly rehabilitated.
Now, this man, I do not think that he is psychologically sound, in my own personal opinion, to be released. And, he has only recently become remorseful, saying that telling the whole story of what had occurred. But we know that he is probably very good at manipulating people, in my own personal opinion. It has been noted on a previous psychology report on Moodley that one psychologist declared him remorseful and fit for release, but that report was found inaccurate by the Health Professions Council of South Africa, and the doctor who wrote that report was fined 10,000 Rand and ordered to undergo further training.
Stage, what would convince you that Donovan Moodley has indeed been rehabilitated?
I think the part that would convince me would be full disclosure of the crime. The part that would convince me would be a proper assessment of his risk to society. We don't see the papers that could get put forward. And I think that's a big flaw, because based on the psychologist's report that we did see, in which we took action against the psychologist and we won our case, even though she appealed it, we won our case, you could see that in that report there were really worrying factors about Mr. Moodley. And he had convinced her otherwise. Understand the nature of the animal. That crime that he perpetrated was one where he had to convince me and many other people of his credibility. And he's done that. He continues to do that. So there's no track record from what we can see where he's changed his approach. And I think what would make a big difference, if papers could be made available to victims, that they could have an insight into the progress. We are interested parties. We are vested parties in that process, whether we like it or not.
And I'm sorry to...
We know that over the years, Moodley has had all these varying stories. And at the end of the day, I just don't think that he has been rehabilitated. Now, there is only one person who stands between us, law-abiding citizens of South Africa, and Donovan Moodley, and that is the Minister of Prisons, Minister Groenewald. Now, comment below if you think that he should get parole. I do not think that he should get parole. He should not be allowed to roam the streets after serving only 19 years. And
so Donovan Moodley could be one step closer to walking free.
After 2 parole hearings, the convicted killer of student Leigh Matthews has received approval from the Correctional Supervision and the Parole Board.
Now, this is pending final consideration by the National Council of Correctional Services and ultimately the Justice Minister.
Now, here is the Correctional Services spokesperson, Singabako Kumalo.
People who are sentenced to a determined period, meaning a number of years, are treated differently from people who are sentenced to life imprisonment. Life imprisonment, the process is much more rigorous and very long, in the sense that your profile, after having served the minimum required time, will go to the case management committee. Basically, they put it together, invite the offender to check if everything is there. Then that profile will go to the Correctional Supervision and Parole Board. They go through that. They make it a point that every detail that has been captured indeed find expression. They may also even invite the offender as well. The victims of crime also do participate. This is what has happened with this particular case. It is unfortunate that the victims, the family or lawyers, have taken what was then discussed in that session and distributed publicly prematurely, because the process has to move from the parole board to the National Council for Correctional Services. That must also take time, make it a point that everything is there, and make it a point that indeed this person is ready for social integration before submitting that to the minister.
Who is the possibility that the man who took your daughter's life could get parole at this stage? How does that make you feel?
It makes me sad, because there are still many questions that have been unanswered. And I think as a victim, and all victims of crime should be able to have finality in such an event. And I think the recommendation, and it's only a recommendation at this stage by the parole board, is certainly premature. There are still so many unanswered questions.
What are the unanswered questions for you 21 years later?
The questions like, where was her body kept? The questions like, who else was involved in the crime? Things like, there's no obvious display of rehabilitation. We have seen a number of court cases brought about by Mr. Moodley, and he's made some outrageous statements within those court papers to court. And that would indicate that that's not a man who has been rehabilitated. There's a man that's made threats to my family. There's a man that's made threats to my legal team. There's a man that has taken on organizations like the HPCSA and tried to intimidate them into certain decisions. And I think those are certainly factors that need to be seen in the outside world. So in a prison environment, you have a very controlled environment. But I think due care needs to be taken by people who make decisions to refer prisoners on parole to actually look at the broader picture and make a holistic approach to that decision. And that's what makes us sad.
And when you say, Donovan, repeat the details in your presence, because I would imagine that 2 decades later, it's still very painful for you to hear, but for the benefit of viewers who may not be familiar with the Leigh Matthews story, 2004, this man abducts and takes your daughter captive, demands ransom. You paid, I think, about 50,000 rand for her release, but still, he shot her 3 times.
4 times.
4 times he shot her. She died. 21 years on, do you want Donovan Moodley to be released under any circumstances?
Okay, so the country has a law, and we consider ourselves law-abiding citizens. And the law says that provided certain criteria are met, prisoners are entitled to go on parole. We don't have a problem with that. We do have a problem, though, if people are released on parole and there are still outstanding matters. And particularly if that person presents a risk to society, and specifically if that person presents a risk to me and my family.
Have you forgiven him?
No. It's not for me to forgive Donovan. It's something between him and his God, not for me to forgive him.
And Tanya, on the legal aspects then, Singabako Ngumalo, the spokesperson for correctional services, basically saying that this information, to some degree, and I'm paraphrasing, has been leaked prematurely. You heard him, in his own words, pointing the blame with a finger at you guys for doing so. Is that what's happened here?
Absolutely not. I was very surprised and shocked to hear that, in fact, because what had actually happened, Rob and Sharon was very distressed and emotional and felt that they could not personally be present this morning. So Advocate Anaditya Hofmeyer and I represented them at the parole board hearing to do the victim impact statement and our representations opposing parole. And we had just arrived back at Rob and Sharon's house when my telephone rang, and it was the media that phoned me. So we literally hadn't even told them yet because we didn't want to tell them over the phone, and certainly wouldn't be reaching out to the press so that they hear it on the radio. So most certainly no. I don't know where the leak came from, but it definitely didn't come from us.
And what is your account of how the hearing this morning went?
You know, I have to give credit to the parole board in the way that they allowed us to present our case and allowed Donovan Moodley to present his. However, you know, the system needs to be looked at, because as victims, for argument's sake, if Mr. Matthews, if Rob and Sharon wanted to decide not to oppose because they're satisfied that he has been properly rehabilitated, that's a choice that should be given to them. But they can't do that because we don't have insight in any of the profile reports. The psychologist's report, for instance, as Rob said, we only were made available to us the previous report because Mr. Moodley had taken the parole board's decision on review, and that was in his court papers, and to our surprise we read what was said there. So in this instance we went and followed proper channels. We requested the department to give us those psychologist reports. It was denied because Mr. Moodley decided he will not let us have access to that. So it's very difficult to reconcile a person that says he's rehabilitated, has remorse, and he's sorry and takes full accountability if he's not prepared to share his profile with us.
In 2023, I think it was, when he had again been trying to get parole, there was a letter, I understand, written to your family, Mr. Matthews, a letter of some sort of apology. And I remember at the time one of the descriptions used around the way in which Donovan Moodley was was orchestrating, shall we say, his actions at the time was manipulative. Do you still regard him in that way, and do you think he's possible at this stage of manipulating the process?
I'm 100% convinced, yes, he is still manipulative, because in 2024 he launched an urgent application because he had been transferred to Leeuwkop,
right,
to be transferred back to Sun City, and his allegation was that there was a person in prison that was trying to kill him and he was fearing for his life. And the state, in their papers, when they opposed the application, put evidence before the court which stated clearly that that person wasn't even at Leeuwkop, and in fact, when that incident happened, Mr. Moodley had pointed the fingers at two other offenders and who actually was found guilty. So, under oath, he brought an urgent court application last year. I find it very difficult to believe that he has changed.
And very briefly, legally, how far or how close is Donovan Moodley, just on the process, from possibly getting out on parole?
All right, so because the parole board has recommended that he be placed on parole, his entire profile, including our representations, will now be sent to the National Council of Correctional Services. They will then peruse the papers, make a recommendation to the minister, and the minister will then go through the same process of perusing the file, and he will then make a decision. He can decide whether to accept the recommendation or to deny it.
And Mr. Matthews, lastly, if you could speak then directly to the people on the board and indeed the Justice Minister about Donovan Moodley's parole effort, what would you say?
Please dig deeper into the profile of the individual. Please take a holistic approach of what has happened, of the actions that he's brought about. Don't just tick boxes and allow boxes to be ticked off to say, he's done this, done this, done this. There's a need from a country point of view to take a bigger picture, because it's not just our case. You hear of so many parolees that once they're out, they offend all over again, and that just makes a mockery of the whole process, because they should not have been given parole in the first place. Make it a proper procedure. Make it as foolproof as possible. Make sure there are checks and balances in that procedure. That would be mine.
Now, comment below if you think that he should get parole. I do not think that he should get parole. He should not be allowed to roam the streets after serving only 19 years. And we know that in South Africa, a life sentence is not a life sentence. Considering all the pain that he put this family through, I mean, he not only kept Leigh's body for 11 days, giving the family that hope for those 11 days that she might still be alive, but he also terrorized them after Leigh was taken from us by going to the Constitutional Court with his false stories, by saying that Rob Matthews was trying to kill him in prison. He has continued to victimize and terrorize this family, and I will be following this case. Now, if you like what I do, consider subscribing, hit that thumbs up button, and also memberships are available. You can support me and become a member for behind the scenes content for as little as 14 Rand a month.